Hello guys, welcome to today's lesson. So today we'll begin our graphic design camp with this first lesson. Welcome. I would like you to subscribe so that we get notified the next time we post our next lesson, and then make sure you give this video a like before you leave here. Okay, thank you. So today's lesson will be talking about the introduction to graphic design and its principles, understanding the basics of what graphic design and its principle. So we talk about graphic design, that graphic design is the way we communicate to an audience through art. Okay, we use some elements, combine some elements with using certain principles to communicate certain information. Okay, now in today's lesson we'll be talking much more about the design elements and their principles. Okay, we will later talk about the color theory and typography basics that you are supposed to get. So we start with design elements. So with the design elements, they are the elements you bring together to form your design. Okay, so they can be the lines, they can be the shape, they can be the form. So when we talk about form, we are talking about 3D or three-dimensional elements with volume in space. We talk about the color, we talk about the value. When you say value, we refer to how light or dark the color of an object is. Okay, then value then sometimes is referred to as a tone. And we talk about texture. So one of the design elements is texture, which is how you want the surface of a shape to feel, or the background to feel, whether smooth, whether rough, whether glossy, how you want it to feel. That's what we call texture. Now we talk about space, which is the space around an element in your design. Now we talk about size. Size is the relationship of the area occupied by one shape in your design. Okay, now let's get to the design principles. So design principles in a nutshell is just the rules that govern how you are able to use these what elements, the lines, the shape, the form, how you're able to use them. There are rules governing them. And rule number one is contrast. So anytime you are designing, you talk about contrast. When you talk about contrast, we mean that you should make elements which are not the same to be much more what different. So for example here we have our heading to be contrast, and now we have our body text what here. So I made sure that the heading was white and it had a background of blue. So in that case we are able to differentiate the head from the body text. That is contrast, creating a vast difference between elements which are not the same. Rule number two is emphasis. You add more effect, add more effort to the elements you want the reader or the viewer to read first. That is emphasis. And rule number three is repetition. You make sure you repeat your fonts, you make sure you repeat your colors, make sure you repeat your shapes, make sure you repeat your what your shapes. So when you look on our far right here, you see that the design here, the designer used two colors and repeated them. The designer used one font and repeated them, and the designer used the same shape. Okay, so you make sure that you are using the same fonts throughout, you are using the same colors throughout, and you are using the same shape, or the same style of shape throughout. Okay, now another rule of designing is alignment. Nothing should be placed on the page arbitrarily. So you look on our far right here, the design here realize that elements to the right have been aligned to the right, elements to the left have been aligned to the left, and we make sure that those at the bottom too, there is a line there. So these lines you see, they are called grid. So your grid, those lines, when you're designing, you place them there so that you make sure that your elements are what aligned. After designing, you make sure you delete your grid. Make sure you delete your grid. They are meant to be used but not to be seen on your design. We talk about proximity. So on our far right here, see that this design, we have the logos at the top, the images one side, the title at one head, and then the other informations at one side. So whenever you pick a collaborative event flyer, and then you read through, you realize that the logos are what at the top or at the bottom. They are always what together. We don't put one logo at the top and put the other logo at the bottom. Okay, so we bring related elements together. That is what we mean by what proximity. Now let's talk about the role of a graphic design in various industries. So when you get to the marketing and advertising industry, your role is to what create advertisements, banners, and social media graphics. Okay, then when it comes to the web design and UI UX design industry too, before a website is developed or before a web app or a mobile app is developed, it has to be designed before the developer comes in. Okay, so a graphic designer, you are required to design the interface. You are required to design the interface before the web developer comes in. Now we talk about the when it comes to the entertainment industry, as a graphic designer, you are required to create the movie posters, the music album covers, the promotional materials. Okay, and then when you get to the publishing and print media too, as a graphic designer, your role here is to what create book covers, magazine layout, and newspaper design. All right. Now, when you get to the architectural and interior design industry, your role extends to signage, wayfinding, and environmental graphics in architecture and in interior designs. Okay. Now, when you come to the fashion and apparel, as a fashion designer, you're supposed to be what a graphic designer. Otherwise, you have to employ a graphic designer who is going to take care of your clothing prints, who's going to take care of your branding. Okay, that's it. So, as a graphic designer, your role extends to this area too. When you get to the healthcare and medical communication, you realize that when you get to hospitals, there are these posters, these flyers that that advise you to wash your hand, that advise you to put on those masks. Those were made by graphic designers. So, as a graphic designer, your role also extends to the medical industry. Now, when it comes to the educational and e-learning industry too, as a graphic designer, you play a role in designing educational materials, textbooks, and e-learning modules. So these presentation slides that lecturers have been using, as a graphic designer, your role extends to that area. You can create slides for lecturers. So when you get to the NGOs or the non-profits and social causes, so graphic design is in creating impactful visuals for uh, awareness campaigns, fundraising materials, and advocacy. So we realize that there are these orphanage homes that come around with flyers seeking for donations. So when they come around, those flyers they are using were made by a graphic designer. And also, when you get to election years, those flyers that candidates or these politicians share, they were made by what graphic designers. So the graphic designers, their role also extends to what when it comes to awareness or awareness campaigns. All right, now we get to the food and beverage industry. Your role is to what create packaging designs, your menu layouts, the food products, or they all rely on the graphic designer. So when you get to the restaurant and you are using the menu, you just bear in mind that it was made by a graphic designer. So your role also extends to that portion. And then we get to the real estate and property marketing. So as a graphic designer, your role also extends to property marketing. So when a real estate agent or a real estate person wants to sell a property, your role is to create visuals that will help him advertise these properties on the market. Okay, now before we continue, I would like you to subscribe to this channel and like, and make sure you leave a comment on new things you are learning today. So let's continue. Today, from now, we'll continue with the introduction to design softwares. So some of the software that you are supposed to be familiar with. We first of all start with Adobe Creative Cloud. The Adobe Creative Cloud is a whole package that comes with Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe InDesign, Adobe XD, Premiere Pro, and the rest. So for the Photoshop, it is used for image editing and manipulation. Image editing and manipulation. So after a photographer has taken a photo, he sends it to Photoshop to edit the photo. We come to Illustrator, which is for vector graphics and illustrations. So for Illustrator, most of the logo you see were made in Illustrator because of the vector graphics, and then no matter with a vector graphics, no matter how you scale it, it's still the quality is maintained. That is why logos are made in Illustrator. And then you come to Adobe InDesign. With Adobe InDesign, it's used for page layout and desktop publication. InDesign is used for page layout and desktop publication. So when you have a brochure or when you have a magazine, you just bear in mind that it was made in InDesign, Adobe InDesign. Let's talk about the Adobe XD, which is for UI UX design. So Adobe XD, like we said, UI UX design, as before a web app or a mobile app is developed, it has to be what designed. The interface has to be designed. So we use Adobe XD to create this design before the software or the web developer comes in. Now we talk about Adobe Premiere Pro. With Adobe Premiere Pro, is mainly for video editing. Mainly for video editing. Now we talk about After Effects, which is for what motion graphics and these animations you see. Some designers use After Effects for video editing, but I advise you use Premiere Pro. Then with the Creative Cloud, the reason why most designers prefer Creative Cloud is that it allows seamless integration between these softwares. So when I create a file in Illustrator, I'll be able to have access to it when I open my Photoshop file. That is my Photoshop app. That is why most designers prefer Adobe Creative Cloud. Now let's talk about Sketch. With Sketch is also a software which is used for UI UX, but for only Mac users. It's known for its simplicity and efficiency in creating responsive webs and app designs. Now, if you are not a Mac user, don't panic. Your friend is Figma. Figma is a cloud-based design tool accessible from any platform with an internet connection. So Figma is also used for UI UX designing and prototyping and also user testing. Figma, I like it very much. I use it a lot. The presentation I'm doing right now is in Figma, and all the skill sync visuals, all the flyers and everything were made in Figma. So like here, let me zoom out and realize that over here all the slides here were made in what Figma. I also have the designs here, they're all made in Figma. Okay, everything was made in Figma. Then we talk the reason why I like using Figma is that anytime I get loads of my machine, I can still access my design and continue working so long as I'm able to log into my account. That is why I like using Figma. So there's nothing like if you lost your work, you never lose your work with Figma. Now we talk about the rest. We have CorelDRAW. CorelDRAW is very powerful. It combines Photoshop, Illustrator and Adobe InDesign. So I'm able to do image editing there. I'm able to create a logo there, and I'm also able to create my brochures in CorelDRAW. But then it has limitations when it comes to the image editing. Now we talk about Canva. With Canva also has a lot of limitations, but then if you want to create good artworks with Canva, then you have to take a lot of time to master it before, because most of the times project managers use Canva because they don't want to get another designer on board, so they use Canva because Canva has templates. So when they get there, they just pick the template, change certain text, and then they are good to go. So that is why I'm saying that it has a lot of limitations, because in that case your creativity has been limited. Okay, your creativity has been limited. It has been limited to what is available there. But then if you want to create good artworks with Canva, you have to master it. With Procreate, Affinity Designer and Inkscape, they are mostly used by logo and brand designers for logo design, branding, and then illustrations. We talk about Blender. Blender is for 3D arts, 3D artworks. Those 3D animations you see were made in Blender. Another 3D software, another software for 3D art is Cinema 4D. So with the Cinema 4D, you can also create 3D arts. Now we also have AutoCAD, which is mostly used by engineers, architects, and interior designers for this construction and stuffs. Okay, now let's talk about basic design terminologies you are supposed to be familiar with in the design industry, so that whenever you are talking about design, person listening will know that okay, you know what you are doing, you know what you are saying. So We talk about hierarchy. So hierarchy is how you are able to arrange your element for us to know that this is first important and this is next important. Okay, so it's the organization of a content to convey the relative importance of different elements. So looking at what we have on the screen right now, you see that realize that I made the word hierarchy very bold and the body text very light, which means I want you to know that the word hierarchy is very important, so read that one first before you read the body text. Now let's talk about typography. With a typography is the art and technique of arranging your text. So when I say typography, you hear type. Type means text. So it refers to how you are able to arrange your text on your design, how you play around your text in your design. It includes your font choice, your size, the spacing, and the formatting. Now we talk about grid. It's just the vertical and the horizontal lines you use in your design to make sure that the elements are what aligned, either to the left, to the right, to the center, or anyhow. You make sure that they are aligned. So like I said, grid are meant to be used but not to be seen on your design when you are what exporting it or saving it. Okay, so we talk about white space. White space is the empty or unmarked space in a design. All right, so with a white space, it's just the space that you have not used. So white space is good because it allows the reader to read without getting confused. All right, now let's talk about scale and proportion. With a scale we mean size. When we talk about proportion, we are comparing. So proportion involves maintaining pleasing ratio between the elements. Okay, so proportion is comparing of what the sizes. Now let's talk about composition. This side is very important. Every bad design you see had something wrong with their composition. Is because of the composition. Most bad designs because of the composition. Composition refers to how you arrange your elements on the design. Right? All right. So your arrangement of visual elements within a design is the composition. So it includes the placement, the balance, the overall structure. All right. Now we talk about vector graphics and raster graphics. The main difference between a vector graphics and then a raster graphics is the quality. So with vector graphics, after scaling it up, if I increase the size of the graphics, it reduces in size, in quality, sorry, it reduces in quality. But with the raster graphics, no matter how I stretch it, no matter how I scale it up, no matter how big I make it, it maintains the quality. Sorry, the vector graphics maintains the quality no matter how you stretch it, no matter how you increase the size. But with the raster graphics, the more you stretch it, the more it becomes blur, the more the quality reduces. So vector graphics is mostly saved in the we have format called SVG. With the SVG, it means scalable vector graphics, which means you can scale it no matter how, and the graphics, the quality will be maintained. But with the it also comes with AI, which means Adobe Illustrator file, and no matter how you scale it, the quality is maintained. Our raster graphics also is saved in JPEG. JPEG is the normal image we know. PNG is a transparent file, and we also have a GIF file. Now let's talk about mockup. A mockup is like when I create a logo, when I create a label design for a fruit juice company. So a label design for a fruit juice. After creating the design, I have to put a design on uh, a bottle so that the customer or the client will know how it look like after printing or after using it. We also come to DPI. DPI is dot per inch. So a measurement of the resolution of printed or digital image, indicated the number of dots. So when you talk about dots, we are talking about pixels. When you say pixel, a pixel is just a square made up of only one color. So every image you see is made up of pixels, which means it's made up of squares with one color. So the more squares you have, the more the picture becomes nice. So the higher the DPI, the more greater the details. Okay, now when we talk about bleed is the extra space you leave around your design. So maybe I'm creating a complementary card, I have to leave a space around it so that when they finish printing and they are cutting, they don't cut my what my design as part. Okay, we talk about serif and sans serif when we get to typography basics. We talk about CMYK and RGB when we get to the color theory, but then get the meaning of the CMYK in mind. CMYK, we have cyan, magenta, yellow, and what black. So the black is represented with K. Now we talk about RGB, which is used for digital screens. It comes with red, green, and what blue. Now let's talk about leading. Leading is the spacing between the lines of text in the typography. So when you pick this first line, realize that there's a space between the first and the second line. That space is called what? The leading. We talk about kerning. Kerning is the spacing between the individual elements. So you realize that KERNING. If I reduce the size between the spacing between the R and the N, the size, the word kerning becomes kerning, which is KEMING. So it is much advisable to use a little space between them. Now let's talk about the mood board. So with a mood board, it's just like bringing together different images, colors, and textures together so that it creates a mood. So you show it to your client. Is this the kind of mood you want? Then you create what? The design out of it. So it's like you are creating something that you can draw inspiration from. Now let's come and talk about the color theory in typography. Before we can continue, please kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel. Kindly give us a like. We are waiting. Okay, let's continue. So color theory and its basis. So we talk about color. Is just the what the color we know, blue, red, green, and things. So color is also sometimes referred to as what? Hue. Now note this, that the meaning of color, the location and the culture of the kind of people around have an impact on the meaning. So when it comes to Ghana here, the color red symbolizes danger, and the color red also symbolizes a moment of sorrow, like funeral. But then when you go to a different country, the color red refers to what? Love or hearts. Okay, so that is it. So the color is dependent on the culture of the people around. Now we have color symbolism and color analogy. With the color symbolism, it's used to signify an abstract idea or represent a belief. It functions as a symbol. In this case, color is what functioning as a symbol. So the color blue is used to represent loyalty or trust. That is why most banks have the color blue. And then color analogy. So unlike color symbolism, analogy is not experienced as a literary phenomenon, but as the direct result of observation. So a good example of this is that linking red, yellow, and orange with warmth reflects a historic relationship with fire, the sun, and the desert. Okay. Now the meaning of colors I'll be sharing with you in the community. So if you are not part of the community, I'll leave a link in the description so that you can join the community. If you want a link to this presentation or this document, you can get access to it. I'll leave a link in the description. So let's talk about hue. Hue is the main property of a color. So when you change the hue of a color, the color changes. That's the main property of a color. If you've ever used the hue and saturation effect in Photoshop and move the hue slider left or right, then you've changed all the hues in an image. Okay. So now let's come to saturation. So saturation is the intensity of a color. The intensity of the color. So when you look at the bar at the top here, whereas are moving from left to right, it moves from gray to much intense red. That is saturation. So the more I reduce the saturation, the more gray it becomes. Let's talk about value. Value refers to how light or what dark a color is. So the higher the value, the brighter the color. Let's talk about tints. So a tint is created when you mix a color with what? White, to make it much more brighter. So looking at the bar here, you realize that the color moved from deep blue to what? A very light and what? Brighter color of what? Blue. Now we talk about shade, which is the opposite of tint. Is when you add dark or black to what? A color to make it much more darker. We talk about tone. A tone is produced when a color is mixed with gray, making it darker and duller. Okay. So we make it dark and dull. Let's talk about the color wheel. So with the color wheel, just a circular arrangement of all the color hues. All right. So we have primary colors, secondary colors, and what? Tertiary colors. With the primary colors, they are the red, yellow, and blue. They cannot be regenerated with any color combination. But then we have secondary colors, which can be what? Generated what? Using the primary colors. They are created by mixing together the primary colors. Sorry for the noise behind, it's raining over here. We also have tertiary colors. All right. Now we talk about warm colors. When you divide the color wheel into two, the top part you get some warm colors. So we have the red, yellows, and the red yellows. They are very warm. Red, yellow, orange. They are very warm. We talk about cool colors. We have the other side of the color wheel, the purple, the blue, the greens. Okay, they are very cool. And then we have neutral colors. So they are colors that don't obviously fall into the warm or cool category. They are neutral. All right. So most of the times we use this for feminine brands. And we have additive colors. It's a technique using light to mix colors together. So the more colors that are added to the mixture, the brighter it gets until ultimately it reaches or it gets white. Okay. We have subtractive color, which is just the opposite of the additive color. In this case, the more colors we add, the more it becomes what? Dark. So until it becomes what? Black. Now we have color modes. We have RGB, CMYK, grayscale, and bitmap. With the RGB, is what we have on our screens. With our screens, it uses vibrant colors. So you see that the colors are what? Bright. The CMYK, it has a less saturation. So these are the ones we use for printing. That's the one that the printer understands. We have grayscale. The grayscale is just an image without color. Okay, that's grayscale. So just an image without color. But then the difference between the grayscale and the bitmap is that the bitmap uses a limited number of values and does not have anti-aliasing, which makes it look jagged-edged and sharp. Bitmap is not that sharp. So we talk about RGB, that's what we've already talked about, that the screen uses vibrant red, green, and blue. So RGB is red, green, and blue. Now we talk about CMYK. This is a subtractive color mode used in 4-color process printing. So it uses cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So you see that this picture here, when you zoom in, it's made up of yellow, you see cyan here, you see what? Magenta, and you see black. So this picture here is just made up of what? 4 colors. Now we talk about color profile. So the color profile is just a tool that tells the screen how to interpret the color. That's a color profile. And then we talk about halftone. The halftone is made up of a lot of dots, mostly used in comic books. The halftone is a printing technique using small dots that vary in both size and spacing to create a gradient effect. Now let's talk about our typography basics. So font types or styles and hierarchy. What do we mean by typography? So initially we talked about typography, and we say when you say typography here, type means text. So we're talking about how we are able to arrange our text on our design, all right, to make written information visually appealing, readable, and effective when displayed. Now let's talk about typefaces. Some of the key aspects of typography you should know. Number 1, typeface, also known as fonts. So typography involves selecting the appropriate typeface or font for a particular design. All right. So typefaces come in various styles. We have serif and sans serif. So with the serif and sans serif, we'll talk more about it later. We talk about font styles. Don't confuse yourself with typeface and font style. So when we talk about font style, we're talking about bold, whether it's italic, whether it's regular. That is font style. Now we talk about line spacing, which is also known as the leading. The leading is the spacing between individual lines on our design. So the spacing between lines of text, known as leading, is crucial for readability, so that the reader wouldn't be reading the same line over and over again. So you see that books that have low or less leading you read one line and then you come back and read the same line again. That is a problem with leading. So the spacing in between the lines should be more. Now we talk about kerning too. With the kerning, it refers to the adjustment of the spacing between individual letters in all characters. So with the word kerning, we talked about it earlier. Tracking. Tracking involves adjusting the overall spacing between characters in a block of text. It can be used to make text more condensed or more open. Now let's talk about the font types. So serif fonts and sans serif fonts. So we'll talk about serif fonts. Back in the days, they used to write on tablets using chisel. So when these chisel are used in typing or used in writing, it creates certain edges at the certain marks at the edges of the text, and these edges, marks it creates, they call it serif. Okay, so an example of a serif font is what? The Times New Roman. So when I come here, let me give an example here. So this Times here, let me change the font to Times New Roman. So you see that at the edge here, there are what? Marks here. So these marks here are what? The serifs. So they are what? Serif font. So Times New Roman is an example of serif font. Then we also have sans serif. With the sans serif means without serif. Okay, without serif. An example of that is Inter. And realize that with this one, the T, there's nothing here, there's nothing here. Look at the S, there's nothing, there's no mark there. That is sans serif, which means without the serifs. Okay. Now we talk about script fonts, which are almost like handwriting fonts, but which are characterized by fluid cursive-like strokes. So an example is the Brush script, the Edwardian script, and the Lobster. They are mostly used for decorative invitation cards and things. We also have decorative fonts. So decorative fonts or display fonts are highly stylized and designed for decorative artistic purposes. They are not typically used for long blocks of text due to reduced readability. So if you use Comic Sans, Papyrus, or Curls MT fonts for any decorative fonts for your body text, it will make reading very difficult. Okay, so avoid using that. Let's talk about monospace and slabs serif fonts. So with monospace fonts, they have equal spacing between characters. Okay, so mostly we use these monospace fonts for coding. So example is Consoles. So when you're using VS Code, the default font there is what? The Consolas. So with the Consolas, they have what? Equal spacing between the what? So that for easy readability. And we have slab serif fonts. Slab serif font mostly very bold of serif fonts, just like serif font, but they are very bold. So an example is this. Where is it? Yeah. So an example is the Clarendon. So let me change this font to Clarendon. So you see how bold and the edges are. They also have these marks, but then they are very bold. That is what we call slab serif fonts. All right. Now we talk about modern fonts. So with the modern fonts, they are characterized by high contrast between thick and thin strokes and have a more contemporary appearance. So an example is Bardoni, Didot, and Century Gothic. They are mostly used for luxury brands, okay, like Rolex. The fonts that was used for creating Rolex logo is a modern font. We also have symbol fonts. So symbol fonts contain various symbols, icons, and pictograms, making them useful for creating infographics, signage, and user interfaces. So this font comes with icons. So when I change, I don't know whether I have this installed. We have Typicon here, a font called Typicon. Okay, I don't have it here, but then let me view it in our browser for you. So an example is this. An example is this here. So you see that the type here, when you click I, you get Instagram logo. Then you click F, you get what? Facebook logo. And you click L, you get what? LinkedIn logo. That is a symbol font. All right. So back to here, we have symbol fonts. We talk about it, and then we talk about font styles. So font styles, we talked about it earlier. We're talking about whether it's bold, whether it's italic, whether it's regular. Then take note, we also have extended and condensed. So with the extended, that's number 9 here. Uh, it is stretched horizontally, but with the condensed, it's stretched vertically. Now we talk about underline and strike through. Now with the underline, you're most familiar with it, and then with the strike through, maybe you are creating a pricing, maybe there's a discount, and then we have old price and a new price. So you strike through the old price and then you put a new price there. We don't take the old price away. So that the reader will be able to understand, okay, this was the old price, it was $20, but now it's now $10. All right. So we talk about font hierarchy. So font hierarchy refers to the organization and arrangement of different fonts and text elements within a document, website, or any visual design project. So font hierarchy, we're talking about how you are able to guide the viewer's eye, making the heading different from the body text. Okay, so font hierarchy is essential for improving what readability, creating emphasis, and enhancing the overall visual appeal of a design. Now, look at the example we have here, talking about lorem ipsum. With the lorem ipsum, with this example here, you see that the heading here was made in all caps, it's bold, it has a different color. It makes it very different from the rest, and in this case, how is the size has been adjusted. You can what read, you'll be what you will be what compelled to read that first. So with that hierarchy, we are trying to control what we want you to read first. Then you move to what the second one, which is the subheading, the white, bold, and italic. Okay, so you probably are going to read that second before the body, because the body here is what regular. It has the color is very low here, so you are able to guide you from top to down. That is what we mean by what hierarchy. But then we talk about pairing fonts effectively. So pairing fonts, when we talk about fonts pairing, it involves selecting and combining different fonts to create visually appealing and harmonious what designs. So font pairing is done to establish what a hierarchy of information to create visual interest in what your design projects. Good font pairing enhances readability, and it ensures that the design effectively communicates its message. Now, when mixing fonts on the same line, designers usually adjust the point size so that the X height, so the X height is the height of the lowercase letters in the font, so you adjust them. So when placing typefaces on separate lines, it often makes sense to create contrast in scale as well as what style or weight. Now here are some important notes you should take on font pairing. Number one, effective font pairing often involves the use of contrasting fonts. So you can use a serif font with what? A sans serif font, so that the viewer will be able to differentiate them, because they are very different. Serif fonts have serifs around them, and then sans serif have no serifs. It's very different. They are very different to differentiate. So they are very easy to differentiate. Now establish a clear hierarchy of fonts to guide the reader's eye through the design. So typically this hierarchy includes a headline font, a sub-headline font, and body text like we saw in our design here. Now we continue with choosing fonts that complement each other. They should have a harmonious relationship in terms of the style, the mood, and the overall design. So for example, pairing a decorative script font with an elegant serif font can create an appealing contrast while maintaining what harmony. Now always prioritize readability. Anytime you are dealing with typography, always prioritize readability. Maintain consistency in your font pairing throughout a design project. Avoid using too many fonts in a single design, as it can create visual chaos. If you use so many fonts in a single design, then the reader is going to get confused, and the readability becomes very difficult. Now, before finalizing font pairing, it's important to test them before you use them in your design project. Test them first. Test them first. Okay. Uh, that's the end of today's lesson. I'll be very glad if you could subscribe to this channel, give us a like, and share it with your friends. If you are not part of our community, the link will be shared in the description, and let us know any new thing you've learned from this class. And also a link to get access to this learning material will be available in the description. Thank you very much.